Does the Bible's prophecy of the end times require Trump's return as president as the new Cyrus the Great for the prophecy of the Third Temple in Jerusalem to come true? The readers of my blog know that I have often promoted modern-day prophecies concerning President Trump from men such as Kim Clement or Brandon Biggs. Because of this, a sister in Christ got angry with me in the comments of my latest Trump video, even though she had previously been one of my most avid followers. However, my original predictions regarding Trump's role were more rooted in my understanding of biblical eschatology than in extra-biblical prophecies from Clement and others. I initially approached Trump's presidential campaign with curious interest, and in May 2016, I published a long blog post titled "How the True Cross of Golgotha Shines Throughout History in Daniel's Visions." Although the content of the text was not related to the Republican presidential candidate at the time, I made a passing reference to him, and also included the prophetic vision received by the Christian firefighter Mark Taylor in 2011, a video interview that is no longer available, about God raising up Trump as the 45th President of the United States after Barack Obama. So, this was the first time I encountered prophecies received by Christians about Trump's important role in the end-time events calendar. Later, I began to promote other similar Trump prophecies. However, I started taking such prophecies more seriously only after the Brexit referendum in the summer of 2016, which seemed to foreshadow new developments in the political direction of Britain's most important ally, the United States. In July 2016, I commented on my thoughts regarding the Brexit referendum in the UK. In the United States, Brexit has also strengthened Donald Trump's nationalist stance and embarrassed the Democrats. Trump was the only presidential candidate supporting Britain's exit from the EU, while President Obama and Hillary Clinton sided with the globalists in their anti-Brexit fear-mongering. Many Britons have begun to ask whether Trump, who arrived in Scotland on the same day that Britain decided to leave, might actually be a better ally for the next Prime Minister of the kingdom than Brexit-opposing Hillary Clinton. But whoever ascends to the position of the next President of the United States, nationalist forces are now rising on both sides of the Atlantic in the final great protest against the New World Order of the Antichrist. I predicted Trump's victory a few days before the November 2016 election, despite major media outlets publishing polls predicting that Hillary would win with over 99% probability. And a few days after the election, I wrote in my blog as follows: "I would not like to boast with foreknowledge, but Trump's victory did not ultimately surprise me. Even though at the beginning of the year I considered it highly unlikely for Trump to win the election after the June Brexit, I strongly believed that Trump would be the winner, not Clinton." My original intention was to publish this article before the actual election day and predict Trump's victory. Although this would have been a good test of the validity of my views, I decided that it would be wiser not to speculate, wait for the election results first, and then make appropriate assessments of the outcome in relation to biblical prophecies. However, my initial assessments proved to be accurate, so I do not need to overturn the reasons why I concluded that Trump would be the election winner. What led me to this conclusion? This conclusion was not based on just one factor, but many. First of all, I do not believe that anything in history happens by chance, but that everything is part of a larger script that moves towards a predetermined ultimate resolution. This script of history and its ultimate resolution are revealed in detail in biblical prophecies. Understanding the biblical prophecies and the details of the events of the last days generally increases as we approach the second coming of Jesus, 12:4. This script must only be interpreted in light of the current events, so that we can anticipate its plot before turning the page and moving to the next chapter. This is what I personally strive for, trying to see into the future in the light of current trends, without forgetting the greater picture of the biblical prophecies. The Brexit referendum in June, where the majority of the British people voted to leave the EU, was a real prophetic signpost. It gave a clear signal as to which direction the signpost of history was pointing. It strengthened the popularity of nationalist movements not only in Europe, but also in America, and reinforced Donald Trump's political message, which appealed to the part of the population that felt left behind by faceless globalization and the political elite advocating its interests. Elitist Hillary Clinton could not create the same popular movement and enthusiasm for her ideas because she did not have the same connection to the people as Trump did. She symbolized the ruling elite and Obama's failed policies, whereas Trump represented change. My conclusion that Trump would become president was also influenced by the fact that many significant dispensationalist prophecy writers had been predicting since the end of World War II that the United States of America would either step back or lose its global hegemony and role as the world's policeman, in order for a united Europe to rise under the leadership of the Antichrist and replace the US's dominant position. Although Trump was not an advocate of extreme nationalist isolationist foreign policy, his America First policy was seen as a threat to the preservation of the so-called liberal world order, because he encouraged nationalist and right-wing conservative forces around the world. For this reason, supranational liberal institutions like the EU began to be called upon to play a greater international role to overcome this resurgent nationalist threat. In my view, the breakdown of the liberal world order in the events of 2016 would accelerate, not slow down, the historical development towards the rise of the united Europe as the center of world politics, as predicted in the books of Daniel and Revelation. And even if Trump's presidency might strengthen nationalist conservative forces globally in the short term, as has already been observed in figures like Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro and Argentina's Javier Milei, ultimately, a new global world order led by the EU would emerge as a counterforce, which shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. Dan 7:23. We already saw a glimpse of this towards the end of Trump's first term, as global leaders initiated the Great Reset project to eradicate the independence of nation-states and people's freedoms under the pretext of overcoming the pandemic. Trump as the new Cyrus the Great. The second reason why I predicted Trump's victory was related to Israel, which I have considered a clock of the times that Christians could use to discern which moment is the night in the end-time schedule. Quoting text I published in January 2017, a few days before Trump's inauguration. While the Knesset's relationship with the rest of the world becomes increasingly bitter, Trump's hold on the White House signifies a rise in the friendship between the USA and Israel to new atmospheres. Such a situation could advance the demands of the Orthodox Jewish Sanhedrin for the establishment of the Third Temple, especially when Trump acknowledges Israel's eternal rights to East Jerusalem and the Old City and Temple Mount there. Breaking Israel News reported on November 10th how the Sanhedrin had requested Trump and Vladimir Putin to assist in the construction of the Third Temple. In the letter sent by the Sanhedrin, Putin and Trump were asked to fulfill their duty as modern-day Cyrus the Great, who authorized the building of the Second Temple after the Babylonian exile. Isaiah prophesied centuries before Cyrus's rise. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. Isaiah 45:1. According to Rabbi Hillel Weiss, the Sanhedrin's plans were to contact these two leaders to ask for their support in this holy mission. The news continued. Rabbi Weiss explained that the US elections had made the eternal Jewish dream a very real possibility. We are ready to rebuild the temple. The political conditions today, in which the two most important national leaders in the world support the Jewish right to Jerusalem as their spiritual inheritance, are historically unprecedented, Rabbi Weiss told Breaking Israel News. The Sanhedrin's letter noted that Trump's surprise victory was due to his support for Jerusalem and reminded him of his campaign promise to move the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, practically acknowledging the city as Israel's capital. The Jerusalem Embassy Act was passed by Congress in 1995 to initiate the embassy's relocation, but has been overturned by every American president since. The Sanhedrin calls on Trump to uphold the law after he takes office. You notice how events in the USA and around the world are not insignificant and random quirks of history, don't you? Do you see how they are moving in exactly the direction that the prophets of the Bible have foretold for millennia before our lifetime? Donald Trump may indeed be the Cyrus the Great of our time, whom God raised to his office for this very purpose. The construction of the Third Temple in Jerusalem, so that the 70th week could commence and the events of the Book of Revelation come to pass before the fig tree miracle, Matt 24:32-34, or the disappearance of the generation that witnessed the rebirth of the State of Israel during the years 2018-2028, PS 91. All of this is happening at the right moment in history, because if Trump remains in power for 2 terms and is not assassinated by the globalists, his term ends in January 2025. I wrote the above text in January 2017, 11 months before Trump acknowledged Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel and pledged to move the US Embassy to Jerusalem as a 70th anniversary gift to the State of Israel. In the same text, I speculated on various prophetic timeframes and predicted something significant for that time period, December 2017 to May 2018. This was by no means a self-evident event, as many presidents, starting from Bill Clinton, had promised to move the embassy to Jerusalem, but always retracted their words due to pressure from the US's Arab allies. This bold move also surprised initially skeptical conservatives, like former Fox News anchor Glenn Beck. However, I believed Trump would fulfill his promise because the timing in the end-time event calendar was right for such upheaval. Prophetically significant events in the Bible often occur according to 70 years or other divisible by 7-year numbers. Although Trump did not become a Cyrus the Great in his first term in the sense of authorizing the construction of the Third Temple on the Temple Mount and in the 2020 deal of the century, i.e., the peace proposal for Israel-Palestine suggested by the Trump administration, the preservation of the current status quo on the Temple Mount was demanded. I understood from the beginning that the recognition of Jerusalem and the relocation of the embassy were just preliminary steps that would ultimately enable the building of the Third Temple. In December 2017, I wrote when Trump made his historic proclamation about Jerusalem, which also coincided with the Jubilee vision of Jerusalem by the medieval Rabbi Judah ben Samuel. Donald Trump is like the modern-day Cyrus the Great, who, after the 70-year Babylonian exile of the Israelites, issued a declaration allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem to build a second temple. It might therefore be that the establishment of a third temple also requires authorization from the leader of the dominant world power, akin to what Persia was in the days of Daniel. One might ask, wouldn't such a declaration make Donald Trump the biblical Antichrist, whom the early church fathers believed would authorize the rebuilding of the Jewish temple? However, the prophecies in the Bible do not explicitly state that it would be the Antichrist who orders the construction of the Third Temple. I was not the only one who compared President Trump to Persian Cyrus the Great, whom the prophet Isaiah called the Lord's Anointed, predicting his reign 150 years before his birth. Isaiah 44-45. For example, even Benjamin Netanyahu often compared him to Cyrus the Great, which from the Jewish perspective is almost a messianic homage to a non-Jewish leader. Israel's secular left-wing Haaretz newspaper reported in December 2017, Christians and Jews now compare Trump to the Persian king Cyrus. Will he build the Third Temple? Rabbi Tuli Weiss stated more reservedly in the conservative Jerusalem Post in March 2019, Trump isn't Cyrus yet. True. The Cyrus comparison hits the mark only if he is contributing in some way to the establishment of the Third Temple. Recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel was not radical enough to earn such an honorific title. When we compare President Trump to Cyrus the Great, it does not just mean that he would be a righteous leader anointed by God, like Cyrus. There have been many other righteous leaders in history, such as Abraham Lincoln, who emancipated the black slaves in America. But the comparison to Cyrus the Great specifically refers to a historical world leader from the perspective of the people of Israel. Cyrus the Great is not portrayed in the Old Testament as a precursor to the Antichrist, but rather as a precursor to the Messiah. By this, I do not mean that we should start comparing Trump in any way to Jesus Christ, but rather that the builder of the temple and its desecrator are two different individuals in the Old Testament prophecies. Cyrus the Great built the Second Temple, and Antiochus Epiphanes desecrated it by setting up the abomination of desolation. Similarly, the builder of the Third Temple and its desecrator are more likely to be two different individuals, even though many church fathers interpreted the Antichrist as the one who would build the Third Temple. Cyrus the Great was also a friend of God's people, while Antiochus was their enemy. Similarly, today Trump is a friend to Christians and Jews, while ultimately the Antichrist will be an enemy to both, even if initially pretending to be their friend. Above is a video of the popular journalist Glenn Greenwald, who is also well liked among the right wing. I don't share it here because I would agree with the views of Nick Fuentes or his interviewer Michael Tracy. Nick Fuentes, known for his support of Donald Trump, is widely considered a very radical far-right individual, a true anti-Semite and a white nationalist. He has denied the Holocaust and urged his supporters to engage in a holy war against Jews. Fuentes is a Roman Catholic who supports Christian theocracy or autocratic Christian monarchy that seeks to separate Christianity from its Jewish roots. For example, in December 2022, he stated on Telegram, "America, for what it's worth, was founded by white Christians. It was not founded by Jewish people. It was not founded by Judeo-Christians. It was founded by white Christians, and white Christians are in the majority. Christianity is the religion of this nation. Not Judaism, not the Talmud, not that stuff. It's just what it is. It's just a fact. And you know what? If we're going to make America great again, we've got to talk about this anti-white thing that's going on. And if we want to restore America, we've got to make America a Christian nation again." And you can understand why influential Jewish people in conservative media are not really gung-ho about that. They're not promoting white identity. They're not promoting this. And I don't think they're thrilled about the idea of revanchist Christianity. They like the idea of Christianity where we're all Zionists and we're all giving money to Israel and this and that, but they're not really thrilled with just Christianity. They want it to be Judeo-Christianity. Left-wing journalist Michael Tracy, who neither is a supporter of Israel or Zionism, seeks to understand why an Israel-hating far-right extremist like Nick Fuentes has supported someone like Donald Trump so strongly, known for being a staunch ally of Israel and Christian Zionists. Somewhat ironically, he also refers to Christian Zionists like Pastor John Hagee as extremist, while interviewing Nick Fuentes, an admirer of Adolf Hitler. However, I share the interview because at the timestamp 17/23/1930, Tracy shows Fuentes a video recorded in July 2023, where Trump speaks at an event for the Israel Heritage Organization, and its leader, Rabbi David Katz, repeatedly references the coming Third Temple. We mourn the destruction of the Holy Temple that happened thousands of years ago. Jewish people around the world still mourn this great loss. And every year, during the 3 weeks we mourn, and when comes the big day of Tisha B'Av, we cry, and we have the great beliefs that very soon we will all see the building of the Third Temple in Jerusalem very soon. And we honor our President Trump for what he has done for Jerusalem and for the Jewish people. So when we sit here today, we are helping and sending out a message to the entire world, knowing that Jerusalem is a place that has to be secure for Jews, and we should very soon be able to see the building of the Third Temple with coming of Messiah. We all have great gratitude to this person. This is a person that doesn't care only for himself, but cares for the entire world, and especially for the people in Israel, and for the Jews in America. My blessings upon the President, his family, and all his friends. May God give a long life, a healthy life, a sweet life, to our dear President, Mr. Donald J. Trump. President. Trump listened as Rabbi David Katz referred to the Third Temple and the future Messiah of Israel. It is undeniable that humility and modesty are not President Trump's strongest qualities. And he tends to boast frequently about his achievements and liken himself to historical figures such as Abraham Lincoln. So when Jewish leaders like Benjamin Netanyahu inflate his ego by likening him to historical and biblical figures like Cyrus the Great, or when rabbis like Katz say he has accelerated the rebuilding of the temple and the coming of the Messiah, it only fuels his desire to further his legacy among the Jewish history. Perhaps President Trump has enough humility and fear of the Lord to understand that he cannot fulfill the role of the Messiah for the Jewish people, as that position is already reserved for the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Yeshua HaMashiach. But maybe Trump also wants to play the modern-day Cyrus the Great and enable the Jews to fulfill their 2,000-year-old wish of rebuilding the temple. Certainly, many of Trump's Christian and Jewish allies are seeking to encourage him in this direction. Only a visionary and courageous leader like Trump would dare to do something so radical, as many other leaders seek to maintain the status quo and promote the decades-long unsustainable two-state model where Israel would be pressured to withdraw from East Jerusalem and thereby surrender control of the Temple Mount to a future Palestinian state. This is not a popular solution, even among non-religious Jews in Israel today. In a recent interview, Trump acknowledged that he no longer supports a two-state solution, or that achieving it would be much tougher after the Gaza war. A development enabling the reconstruction of the temple could also be part of a future peace agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. For example, a day before the October 7th terrorist attacks, I asked on my blog, "Who is today's great Cyrus?" It could be someone like Donald Trump, whom Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has often compared to Persian Cyrus the Great, if Trump is re-elected for a second term in next year's presidential election. It is also possible that the temple would begin to be built even before Trump's potential return to the presidency, and that instead of Trump, this modern Cyrus the Great would be Saudi Arabia's 38-year-old Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or more familiarly, MBS. Both Netanyahu and MBS have indicated, in light of the latest interviews of American Fox News, that Israel and Saudi Arabia are approaching a historic peace agreement in 2020 as an extension of the Abraham Accords brokered between Israel, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, with strong cooperation from the Trump administration. This specific peace initiative between Israel and Saudi Arabia was precisely the reason why Hamas-Iran attacked Israel on October 7, 2023, as later assessed by regional experts. The goal was to prevent the unity of the Arab world with Israel, which would have weakened Iran and its proxies' influence in the region. Is Trump a beast of revelation with a mortal wound? If Trump is to play a key role in the building of the Third Temple and the creation of the Middle East Peace Treaty, theories about Trump as the Antichrist of the Book of Revelation will naturally gain greater popularity. For example, his miraculous survival of the July assassination attempt, in which a bullet damaged his right ear, could be interpreted in the light of the prophecy in Revelation 13 as a mortal wound of the beast that was healed, and the whole earth watched in wonder at the beast. Revs 13:3. But I wrote an article on my blog back in September 2017 about why I don't think Trump meets the biblical criteria for the Antichrist, even if he brings peace to the Middle East. Below, for example, are 5 biblical criteria that Trump fails to meet about this person. All the nations and languages of the world were given over to the Antichrist. Revelation 13:7. Donald Trump is a nationalist who has publicly opposed the idea of a world government. The Antichrist will appear from Europe or the Middle East. Daniel 7:7-8, 23-24, 9-27. Donald Trump was born in New York City, USA, and became President of the United States. From the name of the Antichrist, it should be possible to calculate the number of the beast, 666, with the Hebrew-Greek gematria, Revelation 13:18. It is not possible to calculate the number 666 from President Trump's name using this biblical numbering system. The Antichrist must be both prince and king of the hereditary monarchy. Ezekiel 21:25, Dan 8:23, 9:27, 11:21, 24:36. Trump is neither prince nor king, but president of the republic. To fulfill their false Messiah role, the Jews must receive the Antichrist as their long-awaited Messiah. Ezekiel 21:25, John 5:43. Trump is not Jewish and has no genealogy to prove that he is directly descended from King David. Thus, the Jews can never qualify him as a Messiah, even if he builds a temple in Jerusalem. The Antichrist would also set up a global electronic payment system where no one could buy or sell except the one with the mark on his right hand or forehead. Trump, for his part, has said he opposes a digital currency regulated by central banks, saying it represents a dangerous threat to our personal freedoms. Similarly, Trump's Jewish son-in-law Jared Kushner has been a popular candidate for the office of the Antichrist, as can be seen in many YouTube videos, but he too lacks much of the above biblical criteria that should be met in this person. A century-old classic by Protestant biblical scholar Arthur W. Pink about the numerous Old and New Testament Antichrist prophecies that this person should fulfill. I have also quoted Pink's book in my own books, Prince King Charles III and Israel. Even though many have focused on men like Trump or Jared Kushner, the prophetic actions of King Charles in relation to the Middle East have received less attention from them. I wrote in my blog in October 2016 about how Prince Charles made a second unofficial trip to Israel for the funeral of his friend Shimon Peres. I used the term friend because Shimon Peres was known for his contribution to the Oslo Peace Accords with Yasser Arafat, for which both received the Nobel Peace Prize. Charles was secretly involved in the Oslo peace negotiations of the 1990s, as Tim Cohen documented in his 1998 book, The Antichrist and a Cup of Tea. This visit occurred 7 years and 7 days before the terrorist attacks on October 7th, 2023. Less than 3.5 years later, Charles made his first official visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories. Following that January 2020 visit, the Times of Israel reported, Prince Charles says he wants to visit Iran, be a peacemaker in the Middle East. Interestingly, President Trump also presented his own Israel-Palestine peace proposal, the deal of the century, just a few days after this headline. Shortly after Charles' coronation, the Times of Israel reported that Charles was planning a historic visit to Israel, which would be the first visit to the Jewish state by a British monarch since Queen Elizabeth II never visited Israel. A few weeks after the start of the Gaza war, the Daily Mail reported, King Charles plans to hold behind-the-scenes talks with Arab leaders later this month to discuss a plan for peace in Gaza. In my blog in December, I pondered whether these behind-the-scenes peace negotiations by Charles were also the basis for the ceasefire facilitated by the Biden administration. Although I do not believe that the final peace agreement initiating Daniel's 70th week has been signed yet, it is interesting that the recent unrest in the Middle East seems to often follow a similar pattern to what is implied in Daniel chapter 9. The Oslo Peace Accords were signed in September 1993, and 7 years later, Yasser Arafat initiated the Palestinians' second intifada. Prince Charles visited Israel in September 2016, and 7 years later, Hamas launched their bloodiest terrorist attack against Jews since World War II, which started the widest and bloodiest conflict in the Middle East since the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Conclusion: I believe that both Charles III and Donald Trump could play a very significant role in fulfilling the prophecies of the end times in the Bible. For instance, the covenant predicted in chapter 9 of the book of Daniel, which the Antichrist brings about in the Middle East, could arise through the cooperation between President Trump's administration and King Charles III. Or Trump could establish some preliminary peace agreement that Charles III confirms, as King James Version explains in Daniel 9:27. Of course, Charles could also have a significant role in the establishment of the Third Temple, but as a known friend of Muslims, he is unlikely to directly participate in anything that would offend the feelings of 2 billion Muslims. The sanctity of the Temple Mount and its 2 mosques is a very sensitive matter for Muslims worldwide. I accurately predicted in January 2017 that December 2017 to May 2018 would be a significant period for the State of Israel, as it marked 70 years since the UN's 1947 partition plan and the establishment of the State of Israel in May 1948. I am thus predicting again that December 2024 to May 2025 will be another pivotal period for Israel, because it will mark 77 years since the aforementioned events. Back in October 2016, I mentioned that in the spring of 2025, it would also mark the 70th Jubilee year, or 7 by 7 by 70 years, since the people of Israel arrived in the land of Canaan, led by Joshua after the end of the 40-year in wilderness in 1406 BC. According to the commandments of Moses, upon arriving in the land, Israel was instructed to begin counting their time based on 7 years, and 7 times 7 years, 49 years, and the 50th year was the Jubilee, Leviticus 25. It remains to be seen whether the Jews will celebrate the liberation of the Temple Mount and the establishment of the Third Temple in the spring of 2025, when the current state of Israel turns 77 years old and the ancient state 70 Jubilee years. Perhaps the re-elected President Trump will also bless the project of establishing the Third Temple at that time. Or maybe Charles III will become the first British monarch to visit the Jewish state at that time. Chuck Missler interviews Kim Clement, who later became known as the Trump Prophet, in 2015. In the interview, Clement expresses regret for his past disdain towards biblical study of eschatology and acknowledges his newfound appreciation for it through teachers like Chuck Missler. Chuck Missler, in turn, praises Clement's openness and honesty and seems to regard him as a true prophet of God. This interview is worth watching for anyone who considers figures like Kim Clement to be representatives of the extreme charismatic movement promoting Christian nationalism, dominion theology, etc. I just heard such accusations from a former follower who was upset with me for making a video about Kim Clement and Brandon Biggs's Trump prophecies, and said that she would stop following me for this reason.